is actually one of the things that really took me really depressed, because I couldn't cope with it. I wouldn't sleep because I was thinking of food. It's exhausting. It just was relentless and all the time thinking about food. Not to mention how boring it is. Another way I used to think about food is I would count the calories that I'd eaten that day, and I'd count the calories I ate the day before. It was always the same, because I ate the same food, but I'd still be counting them, and I'd play games where I'd think back to what did I eat last Tuesday, and I'd try and make myself remember what I ate last Tuesday. Lying there, going over this stuff obsessively in my head, made me want to kill myself, and I'm not even joking. Years and years and years of that is exhausting. So the mental hunger is, and nobody ever told me that. I don't think anyone knew really the mental hunger was a thing until just recently when we started talking about it. I didn't know it was a thing. I just thought I was crazy. I just thought I'd gone insane. And I also thought that this was my problem. I'm just a crazy binge eater. That's my problem. I'm obsessed with food, and that's why I need to restrict and I need to control it. Now I'm looking back, well, it's blatantly obvious. My body and my brain aren't getting enough food, so my brain's just doing the intelligent thing, and it's drawing my attention to food the whole time. And it's in a way that is like, I could be in a room full of 100 people, and this used to happen in university lectures. You've got all these people, and you'd be trying to concentrate on what the lecturer said. And if somebody opened a crisp packet, 10 rows back, my attention was like, shum. And I knew what flavour of crisp they were eating. I knew how fast they were eating, and a part of me was like, I don't even want to know what they're eating. But my brain was just drawn to that. And so when our bodies are in energy deficit, our brains become hyper focused on food, hyper focused on what everyone else is eating. If I went out, say, and because I did, like, I would restrict all day to do things so that I could go out for dinner with people in the evening, something like that, and appear relatively normal. I could be sitting eating dinner with 20 people. I'd be able to come out and tell you exactly what each person ate. I would be able to tell you that 3 months later, what they ate. That's hyper-awareness on food. Now, half the time now, if I come out of a restaurant, 10 minutes later, I can barely remember what I ate, let alone what anybody else ate. That's normal. Because, like, our brains are very intelligent, and they need 3 things to survive. They need food, water, and oxygen. And if one of those things is in deficit, your brain is going to focus on that thing till it drives you crazy. I don't know if I'm not sure there's plenty of people in here who haven't experienced an eating disorder, but you might have experienced it in a situation where you're thirsty and you can't get any water. And then all you can think about is water, right? That's kind of what it's like. Or, even more common, you need to go pee. And you're not in a situation where you can go pee. And it'll start kind of gradually. Your body's like, yeah, hi, you need to go for a pee, and you're like, shut up. And then you might hold it for an hour, and then your body's like, no, really. And then you get to the point where you can't think of anything else. And you're even, you might be in a car, and you're even looking at the roadside, and you're looking at bushes, you're looking at places. Your brain's trying to problem solve this situation. That's what it is like when you're in energy deficit for a prolonged period of time. All your brain can think about is food. I could be talking to somebody, and in the back of my head, all I was thinking about is food. And so what happens then is it's actually very hard to connect with people. Like, if you need to go to pee really badly, it's really difficult to have a in-depth connected conversation with someone. It's like your brain is somewhere else. And so that, in the long term, years of that, what that results in is not having any friends. So quite seriously. Because I couldn't connect with people. My brain was always somewhere else, and people can tell. Like, when you need to go pee, people can tell because you're fidgety. But people can just tell there's something that's not connecting with this person that makes them stop inviting you out after a while, stop inviting you to do things. And so your social circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And in the same way that if you really needed to go for a pee, if it's somebody that you don't know, maybe a friend, quite as well, a friend acquaintance, you're just going to be maybe, polite with them. If it's a family member, you can start getting irritable with them. Because you can do that with your family, can't you? We start to get snippy and irritable. And so we start to usually push away our family members as well. Those are the people that we blow up with in anger. And most of all of these anger episodes and all of those things, this irritability is coming down to the fact that your body is hungry. And your brain can't focus on anything else but food, but you're scared of eating, which is a huge conflict for the mind and body. What else have I got? So I've got hyper-awareness around food and exercise. I will be able to tell you everybody else's exercise regime as well. Everybody that may be on a treadmill close to mine, I'd be able to tell you exactly what they were doing. I was hyper-focused and very competitive on everybody else's business when it came to food and exercise. And not just straight out exercise, movement as well, as I described earlier, that somebody else moved, somebody walked over there, I need to do that too. Key one here, heightened emotional responses to food. This took me 10 years to work out that if somebody walks into a room and offers you a biscuit, it is not normal to want to kill them. Like, I know that seems obvious, but it's not normal to feel that way. It is not normal to feel such an inner raging anger at my mother coming in and asking me if I wanted a piece of toast. Like, but I would feel that towards her. I would feel so angry at her for asking me that question. Now that is a really, really heightened emotional response. We should never really feel hugely heightened emotional responses to food when we have enough of it. But when you have an eating disorder and you're in energy deficit, anything to do with food is emotionally charged. It's either that there's muffins over there and I'm just lusting over those and I'm imagining myself eating them and I really want a muffin, it's like a lust thing, or it's a you tried to make me eat and I want to kill you type thing. It's highly emotional and that's not normal. That's a really important thing to look out for in people, is their emotional response to food. Even if they're hiding it, you can tell that they're kind of anxious and they're inflexible and things like that. It's because there's an emotional response going on. Yeah.
So just in your example of when your mother would come in and ask you if you wanted a piece of toast, would you immediately put that as, oh, she's asking me because she's trying to make me eat, or you would just get angry? I
would usually just get angry, and most of the time, because our brains are so smart, and so it might be my brainstem area that's giving me this fear of food, this migration response, but my higher brain, which is the one that does the talking, kind of knows that I'm not, is trying to make sense of the situation. And so what I think our brains do is when we're having a fear response, if the origin of that fear is not obvious, our brains try and make sense of it with the best story possible. And the story that my brain made sense of it was, I'm not scared of the food, she's just trying to control me and that's why I'm angry. That's why I'm angry at my mum, because she's always in my business and she's trying to control me. She could tell, she could make a comment on the jumper I was wearing and I wouldn't have an emotional response because she was trying to control me. It was just due to food, I didn't click. But that our brains are very, very smart like that and they try and make sense of the world, that's their job. And so I was feeling fear, but I wasn't interpreting it as fear, which is the problem. As soon as I could interpret it with fear, I was like, oh, I need to eat the cookie. That's obvious. But that's another one of the reasons that it's so difficult with eating disorders, because our brains just try and make sense of things that are more logical than I'm scared of food, which is illogical. Yeah.
Tabitha, did your mother know what was going on at the time? Did she understand the dynamics between you and her?
Yeah, but I think that because of I was particularly vile to her, and she just was always treading on eggshells, and if she even mentioned the word anorexia, she knew I would be out the door. And it's more difficult because my onset was 18, I was already living away from home, I was independent.
Right.
If I'd been a bit younger and I'd been under their roof, I'm sure but my mother basically had no control over me. She knew that if she pushed me, I'd just be out, and that was absolutely true. I would just leave. If she pushed me to eat, I would just leave. So, yeah. So I think she knew I had an eating disorder. She couldn't convince me of that though.
And then as you got better, that relationship changed?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because my mum's actually great, and I guess I always knew that. She was just a huge threat to me.
Right.
And so, yes. And it's actually incredible to me how 10 years of being absolutely vile to my family the majority of the time, probably giving my mother some pretty awful trauma in the meantime, and the rest of my family, how actually getting better and all of that can kind of get healed. It's pretty incredible. Okay, so heightened emotional responses to food. Resistant sweet in certain types of food. This is particularly culturally problematic because restriction is so culturally accepted. And so it's so easy. You can just be like, I'm gluten-free. So easy. And that means you can restrict loads of stuff. It's great. And I did all of them. I did gluten-free, I did dairy-free, I did vegan for a stint. I did paleo, and the best thing about it is you can just pull on all of this science and all of this great stuff that says this is right, actually, Mum.
Mm-hmm.
It's right to go gluten-free, Mum. It's nothing to do with an eating disorder. Everybody knows it's healthy for you.
Right.
It's so great for an eating disorder. Yeah, and so this is really key in the fitness industry as well. That, yeah, some people do probably have celiacs and need to go gluten-free. Most people don't. And most people, it won't, you know, a lot of people, if they don't have the genetic predisposition for an eating disorder, could go gluten-free and it might benefit their health. But what do you know? Do you know if they have one or not? Do you know if they've got the genetic predisposition? And so I qualified as a personal trainer, obviously, because I lived in the gym all day and I was obsessed with food, so I took a nutrition degree, and then I helped people restrict food for many years. And I did so relatively peacefully minded, because all of my training had told me to help people to restrict food. And so I think that this is one of the big underlying problems in the fitness industry. I worked as a yoga instructor as well, and I still see, you know, people like yoga retreats, and we're going to help you with your nutrition right there. A yoga instructor helping people with their nutrition. What the hell? Like, this is a really big, complex thing. And so, unless you are really sure you know what you're doing and you know all of the long-term things that could happen, if you start messing around with that person's biological desire to eat certain foods, stay out of it. Because you can't often see the damage that's being done. And this is really, the other thing here, and I don't want to go too into this is one of my key rants, is that nutritional science knows shit. It really doesn't. Compared to other sciences, it's light years behind. We only discovered macronutrients like 100 years ago. We know very, very, very little about it. And whenever, you know, a good researcher might take some things, they might isolate some macronutrients, they do some stuff, and they usually make a correlational kind of observation. And then what happens is the media grabs that and they say gluten-free is good for you, or all of these other things. And it's so much more complicated from that. And we really know very little about it. And quite frankly, before humans started kind of getting interested in nutritional science and telling people to go on diets and telling people to restrict fats and all these other things, we did way better. It's been recently, the last 50 years or so, that we've really messed things up. And that's since we thought we'd know more about nutritional science than we do. And so, you know, one of the key problems here is that when we try and tell people to fight their biology, basically it doesn't work. It might work for a very short period of time. It might work for 6 months or a year. They might take some weight off and keep some weight off. It's very rare that that continues to happen. And that it's also very true that maybe it's usually 5-6 years down the line that people start to notice other things deteriorating. And it causes, most of the time, even in the non-severe cases, it causes some form of mental discomfort when people start restricting food. And so it's just a huge minefield. And now having, in the position that I'm in now, I would never write someone a meal plan. And I won't do it. I say to my clients I won't do it. Because I think, who am I? If that person's body is telling them to eat a certain thing, and usually our bodies are telling us what to eat, we're just judging it and saying, no, body, you don't know shit, that's not right. If our bodies, you know, our bodies know themselves and they are themselves. And so I think that when people used to listen to their bodies, truly, humans did way better with nutrition. But like I said, this is a huge subject. I don't want to completely get into this now. But the takeaway being that it's really best to stay out of people's nutritional stuff and not advise them, unless you are really, really, really sure that you know really what you're doing. And I'm talking for someone who used to do just that, write people meal plans, write people weight loss plans, and all of that stuff. And I shudder now when I think of the things that I used to tell people. And I used to wonder why they couldn't stick to them. I used to wonder why, like, then something else would go wrong and they start being compulsive about things, and other, like, mental state stuffs would start to come out. So it's a minefield, and it's very important, I think, to understand that just because you read something in some nutrition magazine or anything like that, don't then take it and run with it, because we don't know enough about this stuff yet. We are light years behind medical science. Yeah.
You know, Tabitha, that is so key. And I've even had medical doctors dictating to me, because of my cancer, what I should and shouldn't be eating. And I've eaten the same way my whole life, like, and never had gotten on a diet. And yet I'm having doctors for cancer prevention tell me to eat a completely different way. Yes, there is some good in that, but then it's taken me completely off of what I used to eat. And and now there's contradictory studies coming out. Like, one doctor was like, eat keto, it's gonna kill cancer. And then I just read another article that said, don't eat keto, it's bad for cancer.
One thing I can tell you about nutritional science is you can find a study to support whatever view you want.
Right.
It's and so we really can't. We don't know enough about it yet. We really don't. But what I know from my experience, and also working with others, is that different people have different nutritional needs. And I think a lot of it also comes from our genetics, our way that our families have evolved. I know for me personally, I'm somebody that needs to eat a huge amount of full-fat dairy to be happy. I just like I eat meat and I like meat and I especially love cheeseburgers.
Oh,
But if I cut out dairy, I decline very quickly. That's not true for all people. Some races, like their evolution, they don't need to eat any dairy at all. If I ate that diet, I'd be really miserable.
yeah.
And I also, the full fat bit's important for me as well. I need full fat dairy for whatever reason, and I'm not even going to question it, because whatever. Who cares? My body is incredibly healthy, and I eat a high fat diet.
I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this a little bit.
I'm sure many of you are.
Well, I'm struggling because I guess the baseline is what your body needs, and then if we're talking about a mental disorder, saying that the biological disorder is really manifesting in the brain, right? Then it's very easy around culture and family to justify all of those things as natural or what feels good or whatever.
And it's horribly confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be in it's very confusing. When I was going vegan, I believed it was the best thing for me, because I had an eating disorder and restriction felt amazing. And when you have an eating disorder, restriction does feel amazing. But my mental hunger was still dreaming of cheese all the time.
I'm thinking on the other side, right? I mean, I'm thinking of the example that you gave earlier, where the person just sits on the couch and just eats, all the time, right? So there's a way to justify that as feeling normal and natural and it feels good and whatnot. Meanwhile, their blood pressure is going up and the glucose in their system is up. So I'm struggling to understand what you're saying, because there are some basics biologically that are true, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think if you're giving an example of somebody who just wants to sit on the couch and eat the whole time, that is in an overweight body, I feel that we still have to look to the restriction that caused that body to come to the conclusion that that is what that body needs to do in order to be in an optimal place to survive. And often what has happened is that body thinks that famine is continuing to come, and so what that body is doing has decided is the optimal course, which can be influenced by genetics and many other things, is there's a famine coming, so I need to store fat. And yes, that can lead to health consequences, but kind of exactly my point, because before that person started going on a diet, they were probably in a much better place health-wise. And that's exactly what I mean by fighting biology. Because most people who end up morbidly obese did not start there. They started at a slightly bit higher BMI than the doctor or our culture thought was okay. And they were actually quite healthy. And that is actually where the Health at Every Size movement, and that's what Health at Every Size movement is saying, is that body diversity is a thing. And some people are naturally and healthy in larger bodies than other people. And if that's the case, and if that person is presenting in the doctors with no other health problems other than, oh, your weight's slightly up, leave them alone. That's really, and so yes, it does all come, and that's so difficult for people to get their heads around in this culture. where really the perception is that if somebody's obese, it's because they are lazy and greedy. And then if you really look into it, usually they're restricting. They might, and they're binging as well, but then there's restriction there. And it's all being driven by the same thing, which is restriction.
How does food addiction play into it? So like food science, and you mentioned the 50 years, like in the past 50 years, the changes in the way that we construct foods to like really hit on brain signals and like sugar and
So there's been recent science, and I actually did a podcast and spoke to the researcher behind it, that actually showed that, say, sugar addiction isn't actually a thing. They compared it to other types of drugs and addiction, and it doesn't happen in the same way. Using rats and studies, there's different areas of the brain that are lit up by that. And what they also concluded was that they could make rats appear to be addicted to certain foods by restricting those foods first.
well, like MSG and like all these other chemicals and all these things that super excite the brain chemistry and that sort of stuff. But I'm just wondering about that.
So, but the main thing is that when you it's like that kind of thing. Anything in moderation is good, but then when we start restricting something, the brain then wants more of that thing, and that leads to the brain wanting to eat high amounts of these what we call highly palatable foods. Now, in my own experience, because I did actually 4 years of a binge-restrict cycle, which was fun, and every night I would binge on desserts, puddings. It was basically chocolate, and I was in England, so it was things like sticky toffee pudding and custard. And I would eat these things in quantities that you can't, I now can't believe that I could do it. You get these tin puddings in England that are supposed to feed 5 people, and I would eat like 3 of those in a row. I ate a whole chocolate gatto to myself in one sitting before, among other things. I used to go through giant-sized jars of peanut butter all in one sitting. I couldn't even make myself do that now. Even if I tried, I couldn't make myself. But I would be able to consume these huge amounts of food. Now, when I stopped restricting, and it didn't happen overnight, but when I started to actually, and it wasn't just about stopping restricting, I had to force myself to eat during the day. I was very averse to eating during the day. I wasn't even hungry, I didn't want it. The thought of eating during the day made me feel sick. But I had to change something, so I started to force myself to eat during the day. And here is what is key also. I started to force myself to eat during the day the type of foods I was eating at night. Because yeah, I could eat a salad at lunchtime. It was really difficult for me to say, sit down and eat a cheeseburger at lunchtime. That was hugely difficult. But when I took the cues from, I'm eating high fat, high sugar foods at night. So that's obviously what my brain's after. I started to eat those things during the day. And after a 4-year binge restrict cycle, within a matter of months, I'd stopped binging at night. And I'd stopped binging. And I haven't binged since. But I've been very, very into, like, I do not restrict. If I want to eat a chocolate bar, I'm not questioning it, I'm going to eat a chocolate bar. But because what happens when we restrict, it's like, I want to eat a chocolate bar. Nope, I'm going to eat a granola bar. And then the brain's still like, yeah, I know the difference between a chocolate bar and a granola bar. Like, I still want a chocolate bar, by the way. And so you eat other things. And then it just leads into a binge where your brain's just like, you're not listening, I'm taking it. And you eat huge, I then would eat a huge amount. I would eat 10 chocolate bars in a row. I'm not exaggerating, often more. Whereas now, because I don't restrict, when I want a chocolate bar, I eat a chocolate bar and it's done. And I'm not thinking about chocolate bars anymore, and I don't need to eat 10 in a row like I used to. So it's kind of like that's how it's the restriction that causes us to go after. I love cheeseburgers. I don't eat them every single day. I eat them frequently, probably more frequently than my doctor would tell me is good. But it's not every day like it was when I was restricting. All I could think about was eating them every day.
But really, a cheeseburger is not that bad when you have full fat, like good just good whole food. It's good protein.
I like the bad ones.
It's but generally speaking, it's good protein, it's good fat,
Depends
and
when
it's
you
good
get 'em, I
carbs.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I
It's
think
power.
that's an important distinction, right? Like
Yeah.
what we define as food. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but when a person's body is in a restricted state or malnourished, none of us really, when we binge, some people do actually binge on fruit and vegetables, but that's because they're steering themselves towards it. Most of us binge on really what we consider to be highly palatable junk food. And there's a reason for that. It's because remember your digestive system's under-resourced. It's not powering full throttle, it's limited. And your body knows that food, that processed food, is very quick energy. There's a reason it's going for that. And so that scares most of us. It certainly scared the crap out of me, because I thought, if I let go and eat without restriction, all I'm going to eat is chocolate, pizza, all I'm going to eat is highly palatable food. And I promise you, that's all I ate. For months, that's all I ate. But then when my body got to a point of nutritional rehabilitation, my desire to eat those foods went to what I now consider to be a normal level. And so it's just coming back to, I guess I learned my body's really smart, actually, and that my mind's telling me, well, I'm just going to binge on these forever. But my body doesn't have my body wants to optimize health. That's what our bodies are designed to do as mammals, and all organisms kind of want to live as long as possible and optimize health and try their best to do so. And so when my body was telling me you need high calorie, highly palatable foods, it knows that it's just trying to optimize health. And when it's got to the weight and the point of nutrition, that it's like, okay, I'm in a better spot now, then it starts to tell me, yeah, you can have a bit of salad with that, actually, I fancy a bit of salad. Because my body's trying to optimize health. But when a body is under-resourced and underweight, it just needs calories, and it knows it just needs calories, and it doesn't really care where they come from. Only it wants the ones that it doesn't have to work very hard to digest. So it doesn't want fruit and vegetables. I hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, really quick, this probably goes off of what you said, but I just want to make sure that I have the correct terminology. My sister was really, struggled with anorexia, and so, with being a dancer, I have my own crazy thoughts, but I really am so concerned with my children. So when I had them, I'm trying to say, from the very beginning, yes, let's have chocolate, let's have cookies, let's have whatever they want. I don't feel like I restrict, but I do tell them, let's have a balance. So we can't have a whole thing, but let's have a little bit. Is that healthy? Because I won't say, oh, that's not healthy to have a whole thing. It just doesn't make our body feel well. For little children, 4 and 9, would you say that's okay?
My mother used to do exactly the same thing, and I think she turned us out just great.
Okay.
And she had absolutely nothing to do with an eating disorder.
So worried about saying the right thing and.
Yeah, but it's with that genetic predisposition thing, I think you can do your best as a parent, and certainly, don't ban any foods. That's kind of going to be problematic.
Yeah, no.
But you've also got to understand that it's somewhat, the development of an eating disorder is going to be somewhat out of your control.
Yeah.
But you can do your best, and it sounds like you are, so that's perfect.
One more thing, if I really am so concerned about people, I've actually lost a lot of weight recently, and so when people talk to me about it in front of the kids, they don't, fat is a really bad word. Even talking about someone being really thin, like that is just not, they think that that's really offensive. So is it awful of me to, when somebody says something in front of them, I'll say, they shouldn't be talking about anybody's body, that's not
That's
nice.
perfect.
Is that okay? Or
Yeah.
because they know not to
Yeah.
say,
And
okay.
we're going to get a little bit more onto that, like teacher stuff in a bit, but I do think that that's really important, because like cultural stuff is just so difficult to even pick apart, and even I think when we don't think we have a cultural bias towards thinness, we kind of do, and it's just there. And I also used to notice that, and I still do, that especially sort of actually being negative about one's body is almost like a cultural bonding thing. It's kind of weird, just if one person says like, oh, I don't like my hair, someone else will be like, well, I don't like my thighs. It's like, what is this? Is this a bonding experience? It's like, so this is, I do think, we are battling, it's pushing an uphill, or you're pushing against a culture that is really priming for eating disorders. But I do think in some places, these things are changing. I think the Health at Every Size movement has done wonderful things for this. And I do think that people are becoming more aware of it. I really do think it's changing, even in the last 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I have read over the last 5 to 10 years about chemicals that people have learned that if they put them into food, it will make you want more of the food. And part of what I'm wondering about is how that all plays into all of the junk food and things, because I mean, we can say that it's fine to have your cheeseburger, and yet if you're wanting that bag of Doritos and it is got something in it that makes you want to eat the entire bag rather than a serving, how do we address that in this whole conundrum?
I think one of the key things is that a serving is never a serving. You get a big bag of Doritos, a serving is not a serving. A serving is like 10 chips. And so I think that a lot of the problem is actually our perception of what too much is and our perception of what a lot is. Because I, in that case, never eat a serving, and I always eat more Doritos apparently than I should. But, I think that our bodies are just really actually quite intelligent, and we should err on the side of caution of believing that the body is intelligent. And we can put things in food that might make that food more palatable and want more of it. But ultimately, for the majority of people, it all balances out over time, and the body balances out over time, and has less of other foods and things like that. And so, yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, like, and also, I do try and, I'm talking about restrictive eating disorders as well. But yes, it's true that the food industry does try and put things in foods that makes them more palatable. And yes, it's also true that that sort of thing used to scare the hell out of me. If I start eating some Doritos, I'm going to want to continue eating them. And now I just let myself continue eating them, and at some point I stop, and it's fine. And that tends to be true for most people once they have that relationship with their body, where they're actually saying, you know what, if my body wants more of this, it's not the end of the world. I'll let it have more, and I won't restrict. But what I do know is that when I was restricting food, I would always end up eating way more of that highly palatable food than I do if I'm not restricting food. Yeah.
For someone who is struggling with eating enough and getting the amount of energy that they need, it makes sense that they would eat it in any form in the beginning, because they just need to get past that point.
Yeah.
But you were saying that when you were past that point, then your body kind of started to regulate and be like, then you could crave salads because your body actually wanted the health and wanted the nutrition. So with what that lady was saying over there about chemicals being in food, and it's designed to make us crave it, do you see that for a person who's healthy and doesn't have any food restriction going on, and they're just trying to feed their body with the best fuel, that eating something that does have chemicals is actually harmful once they're past the point of recovery?
Not really. I don't think it's half as harmful as like the diet and fitness industry makes it out to be. There's a lot of money in making people scared of food.
And if you go off of that too, I think that can lead to more restrictions. So the more restrictions you put on yourself with like, oh, that has chemicals, then you could end up in a cycle of like, no, I'm not.
I actually think, and this is controversial as well, but I actually think our bodies are very good at detoxing